I kicked open the bathroom door so hard that the handle left a dent in the tile wall. Music from the party thumped behind me, but all I could focus on was the sight in front of me. My wife, Jessica Holmes, the woman I'd loved since our college days, was on her knees, snickering like a mischievous teenager caught in a prank. And above her, glaring back with a twisted grin, stood my so-called best friend, Mark Robinson. It felt like my chest had turned into a furnace. Adrenaline and heartbreak merged into one pounding pulse. I could barely think, but I knew this was a betrayal so raw it would leave permanent scars. Jessica's eyes widened for a split second, just enough for me to see she was furious that I'd interrupted her. Not guilty, not ashamed. Furious. "John!" she scoffed, rising to her feet with shameless confidence. "Ever hear of knocking?" That one line was like gasoline splashed on an already raging fire. The nerve. The complete disregard for what we had, what I thought we shared. The woman I trusted above all else stared at me as if I was the one who had crossed a line. Mark, on the other hand, took a shaky step back. He muttered something that sounded like a half-hearted apology, but I was beyond caring about his excuses. My fist clenched so tight I could feel my nails biting into my palms. Just moments ago, I'd been out in the main hall, sipping a watered-down drink and chatting with friends about football scores, oblivious to the fact that my world was about to implode. A sinking feeling in my gut had told me Jessica and Mark were acting strange, sneaking glances at each other, disappearing together. To grab more ice. Suspicion had twisted my stomach into knots, but I never expected this. Not from her, and definitely not from him. But there they were. Rage surged through me. Before I realized what I was doing, my fist connected with Mark's jaw in a devastating blow that echoed through the bathroom. He tumbled backward, crashing against the stall door. Jessica shrieked, but her expression wasn't horror, it was sheer, unfiltered annoyance, like I'd ruined her little game. "You're insane," she hissed, her blue eyes flashing with anger. "Could you not handle that I needed something different?" Her words cut deeper than any weapon could. Any illusions I had about some accidental slip-up evaporated. This wasn't regret. It was pure, cold-hearted contempt. I wanted to shout back, to demand an explanation for this humiliation. But all that came out was a broken, ragged breath. Behind me, the muffled bass of the party reminded me that an entire crowd was just steps away, celebrating, clueless to the war zone that was now my reality. My brain was a storm of images and questions. How long had this been going on? How stupid had I been not to notice? And the worst question of all, why did she find it so easy to betray me? Mark groaned, hand pressed to his jaw. "John, man, Shut up!" I snapped. I could barely contain the urge to knock him out again. "Don't you dare speak to me!" Jessica crossed her arms, chin held high. No apology on her lips. No regret in her eyes. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience blocking her path. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she sneered, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But maybe if you paid attention to what I needed, we wouldn't be here." My heart pounded. It felt like the floor was crumbling beneath my feet, yet my anger kept me standing. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Jessica's callous attitude pushed me beyond heartbreak into a realm of raw fury I never knew I was capable of feeling. I heard footsteps approaching. People must have heard the commotion or seen me storming down the hallway. There wasn't time to process or plan my next move. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. In a matter of minutes, the life I believed I had, loving wife, loyal friends, stable future, was ripped away, replaced by a nightmare I could never have predicted. Blood pounded in my ears, my breath ragged. This, right here, was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized Jessica wasn't the wonderful partner I thought she was. She was a stranger, and a callous one at that. And I was left standing in the ruins of a marriage I once believed was untouchable. I stood there, fists clenched, feeling like the whole world was pressing in on me. It was unbelievable how quickly an otherwise normal evening had devolved into chaos. The hallway outside the bathroom was packed now, Curious onlookers craned their necks to see what the commotion was about. I could hear whispered speculations. Is that John? Wait, is that Mark on the floor? And, oh my God, what happened? Yet not a single person dared to step forward and intervene. They merely watched, wide-eyed, while Jessica glowered at me like I was her worst enemy. My best friend, ex-best friend now, tried to push himself up from the cold tile floor. One hand was cupped around his jaw, and he looked dazed, more from shock than actual pain. I'd never hit someone in a rage before, and a sliver of guilt jabbed at me, but it was overshadowed by the blazing fury I felt at his betrayal. He had the audacity to open his mouth again, perhaps to stammer out an excuse or a plea. But before he could say a word, Jessica whipped around to face him. Shut up, Mark, she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. I don't need your pathetic whining right now. Her tone was pure ice, cold enough to make me shiver despite the heat pulsing in my veins. How could she speak like that, to him, to me, to anyone, when she was caught red-handed in the middle of a filthy act of betrayal? It was as though she wore the label, unapologetic, like some twisted badge of honor. I took a step toward her, trying to force steady words out of my mouth, but my emotions were jagged shards slicing up my thoughts. Jessica, I managed, my voice wavering with the weight of heartbreak and raw anger. You really think this is all some game, don't you? That you can just do whatever you want and walk away unscathed? She rolled her eyes so dramatically I wondered if it was all for show. Oh, please, she said. I'm not the one acting like a crazed lunatic, charging in and throwing punches at a party. Her glare intensified, and she spat the words like poison. You want to talk about loyalty, John? Maybe if you'd been the husband I needed, I wouldn't be forced to find my fun elsewhere. A hush fell over the crowd behind us. For a moment I thought I heard someone gasp, or maybe I was imagining it. Every muscle in my body tensed. My vision blurred at the edges, but I focused on Jessica's face, twisted with disdain, utterly devoid of regret. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's skin. That's enough. A new voice cut in from the hallway. It was my friend Angela, who'd apparently pushed her way through the gawkers. She was no timid bystander. She'd always been the type to step in when things went off the rails. Let's calm down before this escalates into an even bigger disaster. Angela's attempt at rationality probably saved Mark from a broken bone or two, but it did nothing to quell the volcanic rage I felt inside. My hands still shook with the urge to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Yet, part of me realized that continuing to lash out physically would only drag me deeper into Jessica's twisted narrative, that I was some unhinged maniac, while she played the role of misunderstood victim. Several hotel staff members appeared, looking visibly uncomfortable. One of them, a tall guy with a name tag that read Derek, cleared his throat. Sir, he said quietly, we might need to escort you all outside if this, conflict isn't resolved. His eyes darted nervously from Jessica to me, to Mark, and back again. I knew we were seconds away from being thrown out, our friend's entire birthday celebration overshadowed by this catastrophic drama. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the bathroom, not caring that half the crowd parted like the Red Sea to let me through. My head was pounding, and I needed air. The hotel corridor led to a set of glass doors that opened onto a small courtyard. As soon as I pushed through them, crisp night air hit my face, and I breathed in deeply, trying to steady the tornado of emotions swirling in my chest. My mind replayed the scene in the bathroom over and over, each loop fueling my anger. Had it been happening for weeks? Months? Longer? The questions spun endlessly, offering no relief. Before long, I heard footsteps behind me. I expected to see Jessica, but it was Angela again, worry etched into her features. John, hey, listen, she said gently, resting a hand on my shoulder. That was insane. I'm sorry. I tried to speak, but words failed me at first. Finally, I managed. Did you know anything about this, Angela? My voice cracked with a hint of desperation, as though I was bracing myself for yet another wave of betrayal. She shook her head firmly. No. God, no. I swear. Mark's a jerk, but I never thought he'd do something like this. Not with Jessica, and not to you. I believed her, or at least I wanted to. Angela was the kind of person who wore her heart on her sleeve, unlike my wife, whose heart now seemed like a locked vault of bitterness. I sank onto a concrete bench, my shoulders slumping under the weight of disbelief. Why? I muttered, more to myself than to Angela. Why would she do this now? Tonight? At a party full of friends? Angela let out a slow breath. I don't think logic has anything to do with Jessica's decisions. She's not the same person I remember from a couple years back. Lately, she's been so distant, and honestly mean. The word mean was an understatement. Jessica wasn't just mean, she was cruel, manipulative, downright vicious when she wanted to be. But I'd willfully ignored all those red flags, chalking them up to stress or mood swings. Now the truth was staring me in the face. I'd been living with a stranger who was more than capable of stabbing me in the back. My heart clenched with a mixture of sadness and fierce anger. A sudden thought hit me like a shot of electricity. Was Mark the only one? Or had there been others before him? Jessica's dismissive attitude hinted that she wasn't new to this. The realization tasted like acid. This might be a pattern, not an isolated incident. Angela seemed to read the turmoil in my eyes. She squeezed my shoulder again. You don't have to figure all this out right now, she said softly. But you deserve some real answers, John. You have to confront her, really confront her, when you can have an actual conversation without the entire party gawking. I let out a hollow laugh. An actual conversation? She doesn't exactly seem interested in a heart-to-heart. Angela sighed. Well, eventually you'll need to decide how to handle this. Whether that means fighting for your marriage, divorcing her, or something else entirely. But whatever you do, don't let her walk all over you. And don't beat yourself up, her choices are on her. We sat in tense silence for a few moments, either of us sure what to say next. My ears still rang from the confrontation, and my hands itched with the memory of striking Mark. The heartbreak, the embarrassment, the betrayal, all of it twisted together into a painful knot in my chest. I wondered what Jessica was doing at that very moment. Laughing at me? Plotting her next move? Or was she quietly trying to spin this situation to make me the villain? All I knew for certain was that my life had detonated in public view, and I was left grasping at the jagged remains. The one person I trusted above all else had revealed herself to be a callous, destructive stranger. And there was no going back to the way things were, no unseeing what I'd witnessed or unhearing the hateful words Jessica had spat. Little did I know, this nightmare had barely begun. I never thought the silence of a car ride could feel so loud. After storming out of that hotel party, I left Jessica behind, not caring whether she followed. My mind was a tangled mess: anger, betrayal, confusion, and the faint echo of a question I couldn't answer: what comes next? By the time I reached my car, my blood was still boiling. My knuckles ached from where I'd punched Mark. In the back of my head, a voice scolded me. Maybe there was a more civilized way to handle it. But the fury in my chest refused to be silenced. What I'd witnessed demanded an immediate response, and if a broken jaw was part of that response, so be it. I yanked the car door open, slid behind the steering wheel, and just sat there, heart pounding. My phone buzzed relentlessly in the cup holder. Messages, missed calls. Possibly from friends who'd witnessed the spectacle, or maybe even Mark, desperate to salvage our friendship with a cheap apology. The last person I expected to call, though, was Jessica. Yet there it was, her name on my phone screen, the device vibrating against the plastic holder. My anger surged all over again. Did she think I'd answer with a calm "Hello, dear"? It rang until it went to voicemail. Then rang again. Frustrated, I gripped the phone, ready to turn it off entirely, but I hesitated. Something made me want to hear what she had to say, no matter how venomous. So I pressed the green icon. "John," came her voice, steady yet laced with annoyance. "Are you done throwing your little tantrum?" My vision blurred with fresh anger. "You have some nerve," I hissed. "Do you realize what you've done?" Or maybe you just don't give a damn. She snorted on the other end. I realize you just humiliated me in front of everyone. I realize you sucker punched Mark like some thug. That's not exactly the behavior of a stable husband, is it? I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. I humiliated you? You sneaked off to the bathroom for a private fling. You're the one who violated our marriage, Jess. How can you twist it around like I'm the problem? Her sigh crackled through the speaker. You knew things were rough between us, she said dismissively, as though that somehow justified her actions. I needed more excitement, and you weren't providing it. And if you expect me to beg for your forgiveness, you're going to be waiting a long, long time. I ended the call without another word, my heart thundering like a train about to derail. A part of me itched to drive off and never look back. Maybe I could check into a motel or crash on a friend's couch. But like a moth to the flame, I found myself heading home anyway. If Jessica had the gall to show up there, I wanted answers, real answers, not just another round of her sneering and calling me a crazed lunatic. It was close to midnight by the time I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. My headlights illuminated the front door, and for a split second, I remembered all the nights I'd come home to see the warm glow of lamps and Jessica's silhouette in the window. Back then, I believed that was the site of love and comfort. Now, it felt like the setting for a horror show. I got out of the car and made my way to the door. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. Did I even want to go in? Could I handle seeing her again, so soon after discovering what she'd done? My sense of pride told me to walk away, but a darker part of me demanded a confrontation. I had to know how far down this rabbit hole went. The house was silent. No television, no music, just the steady hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the kitchen. My eyes roamed the living room, the framed wedding photo, our half-decorated Christmas tree. We always left it up too long, a guilty habit, and the couch where we used to snuggle up for movie nights. Suddenly it all felt staged, like a cheap set for a play that had closed long ago. I glanced at the ring on my finger and felt a surge of revulsion. The symbol of our vows now felt like a joke. My teeth clenched so hard I thought my jaw might crack. And then, in the silence, I heard a faint click from upstairs. A door opening, followed by footsteps. Jessica descended the steps with slow, deliberate confidence, as if she owned the place, and perhaps she did, at least in her own mind. She flicked on a hallway light, bathing the staircase in an orange glow. I caught sight of her face, still a bit flushed from the party, eyes narrowed with guarded hostility. No trace of remorse. So you came home, she said softly. I half expected you to run off somewhere and sulk. You don't get to talk to me like that, I snapped, stepping forward. Not after what you've done. Jessica paused a few steps above me, arms folded. Oh, spare me the righteous indignation, John. This marriage has been on life support for months. Maybe now you'll finally realize I'm not going to sit around, waiting for you to become a different man. I could feel my pulse hammering against my temples. This is how you tell me you're unhappy? By hooking up with my best friend at a party? She pursed her lips. I'm not proud of it, but I'm also not sorry. I'd do it again if that's what it takes to break free from this boring routine. The cruelty behind her eyes felt like a physical blow. My chest constricted, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. We'd argued plenty in the past, but this was something else. This was an ugliness that defied everything I believed about the woman I'd married. You're delusional, I whispered, my voice shaking. You think this is normal? You think hurting me like this, betraying me like this, is acceptable? She shrugged, a cold half-smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I think normal is whatever we make it. You became a ghost in your own life, John. It's not my fault you couldn't keep up. A red haze clouded my vision. I took another step toward her, fists clenched, not to strike her. Despite my rage, I would never cross that line, but because I was overwhelmed, physically trembling with heartbreak. Jessica saw the anger in my eyes and smirked. Hit me, she taunted. Go ahead, do it if it makes you feel better. Maybe that'll be your big revenge story, huh? I drew a shaky breath, forcing myself to stay in control. "Get out," I finally managed. "You want to act like this? Then leave. This is my house, Jessica. Not your playground." She arched an eyebrow. "You're telling me to leave my own home? That's rich." "It's not your home," I hissed, voice raw with emotion. "Not anymore. You lost that right the moment you and Mark—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Bile rose in my throat. She stood there, unflinching, for several seconds. Then, as if bored, she brushed past me. "Fine. I'll go. But don't think this means I'm gone forever. You and I aren't done." I watched her stride to the front door with an air of superiority, almost as though I were the intruder. She grabbed a coat from the rack, shot me one last dismissive glance, and left. The door slammed, and I was alone in the silence, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. My legs buckled, and I sank onto the living room couch, hands shaking so violently that I couldn't even pull out my phone. Tears threatened to spill, but I choked them back, blinking hard. Somewhere in my mind, I realized that her final words, "You and I aren't done," felt more like a threat than anything else. I sat there, in the wreckage of a life I thought was stable, wondering how on earth I would pick up the shattered pieces. One thing was clear: Jessica wasn't finished tormenting me, and the fallout from that night would be far worse than I'd first imagined. By the time morning light crept through the living room curtains, I'd barely slept a wink. I drifted in and out of a chaotic half-slumber, haunted by visions of Jessica's scornful sneer. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug expression, her complete lack of remorse twisting my gut into knots. Eventually, my phone's alarm jolted me awake. For a few hopeful seconds, I thought it had all been a terrible dream. Then I noticed the empty cushion where Jessica usually lounged in the mornings, scrolling social media or sipping coffee. A hollow ache settled in my chest as reality hit me again. She was gone, voluntarily, defiantly, and I was left to deal with the wreckage. Desperate for some semblance of normalcy, I headed upstairs to shower, but even that routine was tainted by memories: her scented body wash, her hair clip resting on the bathroom counter. Every reminder felt like a fresh wound. I twisted the faucet handle harder than I should have, the water sputtering angrily before rushing out. Under the pounding stream, I tried to think, to plan my next step. That's when my phone started ringing again, echoing from the bedroom. I toweled off quickly and rushed to answer, my heart flipping when I saw Angela's name on the screen. She'd been my one ally in last night's fiasco, so I grabbed the phone like it was a lifeline. "John," she said, her voice tight with concern. "I just got off the phone with some mutual friends. They said Mark's telling people you ambushed him at the party, claiming it was unprovoked." My blood heated instantly. "Are you kidding me? Unprovoked? He was hooking up with my wife in the bathroom. Is everyone conveniently forgetting that part?" Angela sighed. "People will believe what they want to believe, especially since Mark's jaw is swollen, and you're known to have a short fuse, at least compared to him." Her words stung, mostly because they were partially true. I'd always prided myself on being a calm guy, but everyone has a breaking point, and Mark had found mine in the worst possible way. Now he was apparently spinning the story to portray himself as the victim, hoping to salvage his reputation. I sank onto the edge of the bed, pinching the bridge of my nose in frustration. "So I'm the villain? Great. Just great. Look," Angela said, her tone softening. "I'm telling you this so you're not blindsided if people start asking questions. Especially about Jessica. She isn't exactly defending you. Word is, she's telling anyone who'll listen that you've been emotionally distant for months, and she was just looking for comfort. It's disgusting how she's turning it all around on you." My pulse thundered in my ears. It shouldn't have surprised me. Jessica never took responsibility for anything. Still, hearing that she was brazenly rewriting our marriage history felt like another punch to the gut. "What do I do, Angela? File for divorce? Kick her out permanently?" My voice sounded flat, drained. "She left last night, but she said she'd be back. I don't even know if I can handle living under the same roof." Angela paused, and I could almost hear her choosing her words carefully. You need advice from a lawyer, not just a friend. But yeah, if I were you, I'd at least look into your options. You don't want to be blindsided by some weird legal move on her part. Her suggestion lingered like a cold breeze. Divorce wasn't just a word, it was a total upheaval of the life I'd built. Yet the reality of Jessica's betrayal was undeniable. I thanked Angela and ended the call, feeling more alone than ever. A sharp pang of hunger reminded me I'd barely eaten in 24 hours. Even so, the thought of food churned my stomach. I forced myself downstairs and settled on making coffee, something to keep me alert, while my brain churned through possible scenarios. Halfway through measuring the grounds, my phone buzzed again. I groaned, expecting more drama. But this time, the caller was Detective Ramos, a name I recognized because we'd played on the same intramural softball team a few summers back. He was a police detective, and the sight of his name on my screen gave me a jolt of unease. Hey, John, he said when I picked up. I heard about the incident at the hotel last night. I'm calling off the record, just to give you a heads up. Please tell me Mark hasn't filed an assault report. I muttered, my throat tightening. Well, Ramos continued, as of this morning, no formal report has been submitted. But rumor has it Mark's considering pressing charges. He's apparently got some bruises and a possible minor fracture. Honestly, if your story is that he was involved with your wife, that could work in your favor, but it's messy. You might want to document everything, text messages, witness statements, just in case he tries to blame it all on you. For a moment, I just stared at the floor, feeling a fresh wave of disbelief. How had my life gone so wrong, so fast? One day I was a relatively happy husband, the next I was a potential defendant in an assault case. All because Jessica decided to tear our vows apart in a seedy bathroom rendezvous. I appreciate the tip, I finally said, hard hammering. Is there anything else I should know? Ramos sighed. Just be careful. Emotions are running high, and that can lead to impulsive decisions on both sides. If you can avoid direct contact with Mark for now, do it. And John, watch your back. People sometimes do crazy things when their pride is hurt. I thanked him and hung up. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam curling into the air. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind, the biggest question being, who else would Jessica drag into this mess? She was vindictive. If she wanted, she could manipulate events to paint me as some abusive monster. The doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. Was she back already to torment me further? Cautiously, I peered through the window. Standing on the porch was Michael, another close friend, or at least someone I'd considered a friend before this fiasco. I took a deep breath and opened the door, bracing for another wave of uncertainty. Michael looked torn, a mix of sympathy and apprehension in his eyes. John, he said quietly, I wanted to check on you. Last night was insane. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I studied his expression. Part of me wanted to lash out, to demand why no one had warned me about Mark or Jessica. But another part recognized that maybe my friends were just as blindsided. I stepped aside, letting him in. Thanks for coming, I muttered. I could use someone to talk to. He slipped inside, glancing around like he expected Jessica to pop out from behind a corner. Is she here? I shook my head. Not right now. But I have a feeling she'll show up soon enough. She made it clear this isn't over. Michael grimaced. I won't stay long then. But, John, I saw something you need to know about. He hesitated, as though uncertain how to proceed. Last night, after you left, I overheard Jessica telling some people that Mark's just one of many. She said she'll do whatever it takes to prove you're the problem, not her. My heart sank, and fury rippled through my veins. So it was worse than I suspected. Jessica was determined to rewrite the story, sabotage my reputation, and possibly keep her twisted secrets hidden behind accusations. I forced myself to remain calm, though every fiber in my being screamed for revenge. Thanks for telling me. I managed, voice taut. I guess I need to prepare for battle. Michael put a hand on my shoulder. We've got your back, man. Just keep your head on straight, okay? I nodded, though I didn't feel calm or prepared at all. My life was unraveling at lightning speed, and the woman I'd once called my soulmate was leading the charge. After Michael left, I walked him to the door and locked it behind him, double-checking the bolt as though I could somehow barricade myself from the chaos swirling around me. My entire body felt heavy. Leaning against the wall in the front hallway, I shut my eyes and willed away the tension knotting my shoulders. Just a few days ago, life had been, not perfect, but normal enough. Now, it was as though someone had lit a fuse under my marriage and every aspect of my social circle. I tried to busy myself by tidying up the house, a feeble attempt to reclaim control. Throwing out empty boxes, stacking old newspapers for recycling, meaningless tasks, really. Yet my mind refused to settle. Memories of Jessica's condescending tone replayed in my head like a broken record. Maybe if you'd been the husband I needed, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere. I was nearly done putting away the last of the dishes when a sharp knock on the front door jolted me from my thoughts. My heart rate spiked. Was she back? Had she come to spew more venom or to gather her things? Holding my breath, I opened the door. Standing on the porch was an unfamiliar man wearing a tailored gray suit and a practiced, if slightly smug, smile. He had a sleek briefcase in one hand and a business card pinched between his fingertips in the other. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "I'm Trevor Marshall. I represent certain interests connected to your wife." My gut reaction was to slam the door, but something in his measured tone made me curious. Or maybe I was just too tired to pick another fight. "You're a lawyer?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. His smile widened. "Yes, I am. May I come in?" I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was a legal confrontation in my living room. But there was no sense in drawing this out. "Sure," I replied, stepping aside. Trevor walked in like he owned the place, glancing at our family photos on the wall, the scattered mail on the entry table. For some reason, I felt self-conscious, but I squared my shoulders, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "So," I said, guiding him to the living room, "you're here on Jessica's behalf?" He inclined his head. "I am. First, let me say that I'm not here to antagonize you, John. I just want to make sure everything remains civil." A scoff escaped me. "Civil? She's out there telling everyone she cheated because I'm some kind of monster, and now you show up acting like we're just two neighbors discussing a fence line. I'm not sure civil is the right word for this situation." Trevor set his briefcase on the coffee table, maintaining that polished composure. "I understand this is a challenging time for you. However, Jessica has certain concerns that you might act rashly, either toward her or toward your shared assets. She doesn't want you disposing of property, or making any drastic financial moves without her input. Is that a joke?" I snapped, heat rushing to my face. "She's the one who humiliated me in a public place. She's the one who betrayed our vows. Now she thinks I'm going to run off with what, exactly? We have a mortgage and a joint bank account. I'm not the one acting insane." Trevor's gaze flicked to a small crack in the wall near the staircase. I felt a surge of shame, remembering the time I'd slammed a door too hard during an argument with Jessica weeks ago. As if reading my thoughts, Trevor cleared his throat. "From her perspective, you've demonstrated volatility. The altercation with Mark did not help matters." Anger bubbled up, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I hit him because he was hooking up with my wife behind my back. If you don't understand why that might provoke a person, you're in the wrong profession." Trevor just nodded, unruffled by my frustration. "I'm merely conveying her position, John. She wants to ensure that any legal separation or divorce proceedings address both parties' rights. She's not trying to destroy you, she just wants to protect herself." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Protect herself? From me? That's rich. I'm the one who was blindsided. She's the one who humiliated me." Trevor shifted, a shadow passing over his expression. Off the record, I think you both might benefit from some space. If you choose to pursue a formal separation, I can provide documents to that effect. In the meantime, my advice is to avoid contact until things cool down." A beat of silence passed. I stared at this impeccably dressed lawyer, feeling like I'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. "I'll take it under advisement," I said through gritted teeth. "Is that all?" He closed his briefcase with a click. "For now, yes. I'll leave you with my card. If you have legal counsel of your own, please pass along my information so we can work out a mutually agreeable arrangement." "Right," I said, taking the card with a stiff nod. "Take care, then." He gave me a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes and walked out. My hand shook as I closed the door behind him. The nerve of Jessica, sending a lawyer here to talk about me being volatile and to insinuate that I might do something underhanded. My skin crawled with the injustice of it all. I paced back and forth, mind reeling. Should I hire my own attorney? Probably. Did I have the energy to dive into that right now? My exhaustion weighed on me like a lead blanket. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in my gut: rage, sadness, humiliation, and an odd flicker of relief that things were finally out in the open. As I tried to calm myself, I recalled Michael's warning: Jessica might be spinning this story every which way, rewriting our marriage from day one, claiming that I was inattentive or borderline abusive. If that was her angle, I needed more than just moral high ground. I needed evidence, or at least a clear head to refute her lies. With a shaky sigh, I headed upstairs to the bedroom. I opened the closet and stared at Jessica's half-empty side. She'd taken a few clothes, but most of her belongings remained. My eyes landed on an old shoebox tucked in the corner, a box where she used to keep random photos, receipts, and sentimental notes. Maybe there was something in there that could piece together the timeline of her betrayal, or at least give me a clue about how long this had been going on. I pulled the box down and set it on the bed. Inside were pictures of us at a beach years ago, smiling with tans and matching sunglasses, looking every bit like a happy couple. Stubs from movies we'd seen, a few dried-out flowers from a Valentine's bouquet. Memories so sweet they stung. But as I shuffled through them, I noticed an envelope with a date scribbled on the front, just a month ago. My pulse quickened. Inside was a receipt for a hotel room, paid in cash, and a note on a napkin. "Meet me at 8. No signature, but scrawled in Jessica's unmistakable handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. So it wasn't just Mark. She'd been renting hotel rooms at least a month before the bathroom fiasco. Possibly meeting someone else, or maybe it was Mark back then, too. My chest tightened as realization sank in. This was bigger than I'd imagined. She'd been lying for much longer than just a few weeks. The woman I'd devoted my life to had shattered every ounce of trust, all while painting me as the dangerous one. Clutching the incriminating receipt, I felt a surge of grim resolve. This was no longer a matter of heartbreak alone, it was war. And Jessica's lawyer had just fired the opening salvo. If she wanted to play dirty, I would meet her blow for blow. I refused to let her manipulate the narrative to cast me as the villain. Jaw set, I carefully placed the receipt in a safe spot. The time for heartbreak and confusion was over. If Jessica wanted a battle, she'd get one, and I'd be damned if I let her walk away unscathed from this twisted betrayal. The shoebox evidence rattled me more than I cared to admit. Staring at that hotel receipt and Jessica's handwritten note, I felt like a fool who'd been left in the dark for far too long. A month ago, maybe longer, she was already sneaking around, paying cash for secret rooms. There was no telling how many times she'd done it or with whom. My anger shifted into something sharper, a cold determination to protect myself from whatever schemes she might unleash next. I spent the next hour gathering every piece of documentation I could find. Bank statements, credit card records, text messages, anything that might hint at Jessica's betrayals. Despite my swirling emotions, a part of me felt oddly calm. Collecting evidence gave me a sense of control, a belief that I could piece together a narrative strong enough to counter her manipulations. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, my phone pinged with a new message from Angela. "Hey John. Are you free?" I found out something about Jessica you need to know ASAP. Without hesitation, I replied that I was free to talk. She suggested meeting at a local cafe, a place we both knew well, cozy booths, strong coffee, zero chance of running into Jessica by accident. I grabbed my car keys and the handful of documents I'd unearthed, hoping Angela had something helpful. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, just the faint hum of a radio and a couple of customers pecking at laptops. Angela stood up from a booth near the window, her expression grim. I slid into the seat across from her. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries wafted around us, but I had no appetite. She leaned in, voice low. Before I say anything else, I want you to know I have your back. This is intense. My heart thumped. Spit it out, On. I'm already on edge. She sighed. I did some digging. You know how Jessica was always cryptic about her phone? Never letting anyone else use it, changing passwords every week? I asked around, and it turns out Mark isn't the only man she's been meeting. I exhaled a shaky breath, though I wasn't entirely surprised. The hotel receipt had prepared me for the worst. Go on. There's this guy named Ethan Clark, a mutual acquaintance we met at a charity event last year. I only remember him because he was flirting with every married woman in sight. Anyway, rumor has it Jessica and Ethan have been hooking up on and off for months. Some people saw them together at a lounge across town, acting way too cozy. A surge of nausea twisted my stomach. Mark was one thing, an enormous betrayal in itself, but multiple affairs turned my life into a warped soap opera. So it was never just Mark, I muttered, eyes fixed on a chipped corner of the table. Angela rubbed her temples. I'm sorry, John. If it's any consolation, people are starting to realize she's not exactly the victim here. A few have come forward saying Jessica was bragging about conquering men and how you were too clueless to figure it out. My grip on the edge of the table tightened. It was surreal, hearing these revelations as if they were gossip in a tabloid. This was my marriage, my life. Is she proud of this? I asked, voice trembling with rage. Angela nodded grimly. Apparently so. She's painting you as controlling and saying you never listened to her needs, so she found excitement elsewhere. But more and more folks are seeing the cracks in her story. The problem is, she's talking to a lawyer, Trevor Marshall, right? I gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, he paid me a visit this morning. Came by to ensure civility. More like he's here to twist facts in her favor. Angela glanced at the documents I'd brought, half buried in a manila folder. You gathering evidence? I nodded. Everything I can. Receipts, old texts, anything to prove this isn't my fault. She's the one cheating, lying, disrespecting me at every turn. Angela reached across the table, giving my hand a supportive squeeze. Good. Keep it up. The more you have, the better you can defend yourself, legally or socially. Her concern brought a fleeting sense of comfort. But a jarring thought flashed across my mind. What if Jessica was already collecting her own evidence to pin me as an abuser or an unfit partner? She seemed determined to paint me as the villain. The memory of her sneer last night played on repeat in my head. Hit me, go ahead. She'd wanted me to snap. And if I had, she'd have all the justification she needed. I sighed heavily. You're right. I just wish I didn't have to fight someone I once loved. Angela's eyes softened. I know. But the Jessica you married, she's gone, if she ever really existed. This new version of her is dangerous, John. Don't underestimate her. With that sobering reminder, I walked Angela to her car. She offered a quick hug before driving off, leaving me in the parking lot, my thoughts churning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, a reminder that the day was slipping away. But I had no intention of heading home, not yet. My house felt tainted by Jessica's presence, even in her absence. A sudden impulse struck me. Why not confront Ethan Clark directly? If he was as brazen as the rumors suggested, maybe he'd confirm Jessica's duplicity. I hopped into my car, fumbling for the address. I vaguely remembered he ran a small art gallery downtown, the kind that hosted wine and cheese receptions and featured overpriced modern pieces. Through a quick search on my phone, I found the address: Clark Contemporary Art, 1412 Bancroft Street. Perfect. Traffic was brutal, giving me plenty of time to think about whether this was a terrible idea. What if Ethan laughed in my face? Or worse, what if he reveled in the chance to humiliate me further? But the anger refused to let go. I needed answers, confirmation that my wife had been cheating with more than one man. I found a parking spot a block away and marched to the gallery's glass doors. A woman in a sleek black suit welcomed me, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. Abstract paintings lined the walls, all vibrant splashes of color that felt chaotic, mirroring my emotions. I asked for Ethan, and she raised an eyebrow before pointing me to a small office near the back. He was there, seated behind a minimalist desk, tapping at his phone. Ethan was tall, with a chiseled jaw and slick back hair, exactly the type you'd imagine bragging about conquering married women. As soon as he saw me, his expression shifted from mild boredom to wary curiosity. I cleared my throat. "Ethan Clark, right?" He stood up, offering a polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" For a moment, the words caught in my throat. This was the guy who might have been sneaking around with my wife, laughing behind my back. The rational part of me knew I couldn't just throw a punch without evidence. I forced myself to remain composed. "You know me," I began slowly. "I'm John, Jessica's husband." An uneasy flicker passed across his face. He recovered quickly, his smile growing more guarded. "Oh, I see. And what brings you here?" My heart thundered, adrenaline flooding my system. "I just have a few questions about you and my wife." Ethan leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "That's a conversation we might want to have in private. Shall I close the door?" I nodded, ignoring the tremor in my voice. "Sure. Let's keep it between us." He stepped around me, quietly shutting the door. Something in his posture hinted he wasn't surprised. It was a silent acknowledgement that he'd expected this confrontation eventually. As he turned back, I caught a hint of a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth, like he found my situation amusing. My fists tightened at my sides. If Jessica had bragged about her conquests, then maybe Ethan was the type who enjoyed living dangerously. Whatever the case, I was here to get answers. And I intended to unearth every ugly secret my wife thought she could hide. Ethan closed the office door with a slow, deliberate motion, like he was savoring the tension crackling between us. I stood there, fists clenched, trying to keep a lid on the fury boiling in my chest. This man might have been sneaking around with my wife for months, and he had the audacity to offer me a smug half-smile as though we were about to discuss a business merger. I glanced around the minimalist office, a single modern painting on the wall, a sleek white desk, and chairs that looked like props from some high-end furniture catalog. It was all painfully pretentious. Ethan leaned against the desk, crossing his arms over his impeccable tailored suit. Something about his posture screamed that he relished conflict, the kind of guy who thrived on drama. "You say you're Jessica's husband," he began, not a hint of apology in his tone. "So what do you want from me? If this is about that bathroom fiasco, let's just say I had nothing to do with it." He spoke casually, almost flippantly, and it made my blood simmer hotter. "Don't play dumb," I growled. "I know all about the hotel receipts, and I heard rumors about you too. She's obviously been running around behind my back for a while." Ethan gave a small shrug. "That's your word against mine. You're acting like she's some innocent little damsel who got corrupted, but newsflash, Jessica is no delicate flower. She goes after what she wants." His words stung, partly because they echoed a growing fear inside me, that Jessica was always this way, and I'd been too naive to see it. "So you admit you've been hooking up with her?" I pressed, my nails biting into my palms. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Let's just say we've had encounters. If you want details, I'm sure you can guess. But I'm not going to apologize for enjoying myself with a willing participant." My vision went red at the edges. Still, I wrestled the impulse to lunge at him. Another assault charge was the last thing I needed. How long has it been going on? I demanded, voice taut. And were you the only one, or do you know about Mark? Ethan's grin widened, like a wolf spotting wounded prey. Mark, huh? So that's out in the open too? Guess you discovered she's got a taste for variety. Well, if you must know, she and I first hooked up sometime after that charity event last year, 8 or 9 months ago, maybe. It was casual. We both liked a thrill. 8 or 9 months. My heart pounded painfully. That meant Jessica had been lying to me for nearly a year, all the while sharing my bed and acting like everything was fine. I fought back the urge to smash something. You're despicable, I hissed. Ethan tilted his head. Look, man, I'm not the one who made vows to you. Jessica did. If you want to blame someone, blame her, or blame yourself for letting her get bored. What did you expect me to do when a gorgeous married woman practically threw herself at me? It took every ounce of self-control not to swing at him. So you're proud of being her sidekick in this? You think it's funny? He shrugged, unruffled. Funny? Not really. But I'm not going to lie. I enjoy a good scandal, especially when it involves a woman like Jessica. She's the type who doesn't hold back. The way he said, "She doesn't hold back," made my stomach churn. I felt sick imagining just how many nights she lied, saying she had a work function or was meeting friends, while she was actually with Ethan. Or Mark. Or God knows who else. Enough. I growled, my voice low. I came here for clarity. Now I have it. But let me be absolutely clear, Ethan. If you keep messing with me, if you feed Jessica more ammunition to use against me in court or anywhere else, I won't just stand by. I'm done being the pushover in this story. He laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. Court? Oh, you two are going that route, huh? Let me guess, divorce with a side of drama? Well, do what you have to do. But don't blame me if Jessica spins her own story. She's got a knack for that, and you'd be surprised how many people are willing to believe her. That last remark ignited a fresh wave of anxiety. Jessica was already using a lawyer to paint me as some unstable brute. If Ethan provided any twisted version of events to support her claims, it could further ruin my reputation. The stakes felt impossibly high. I took a slow breath, straining to keep calm. I know exactly how manipulative she can be. But you won't get away with slandering me. I have evidence, phone records, receipts, plenty to show who's really at fault here. If you give her any more ammo, just remember, I can drag you into the mud too. His eyes narrowed. That a threat? Call it a promise, I snapped. I'm not letting her sink me without a fight. And if you decide to meddle, I'll make sure you share the downfall. We stared each other down in tense silence. The hum of the gallery's air conditioning filled the void. Finally, Ethan turned away, acting as if he was bored. Well, I've got a meeting with a client soon. Unless you want to buy some art, I think we're done here. I took a step back, chest heaving. Every muscle in my body felt coiled, ready to strike, but I had to remind myself that decking Ethan would accomplish nothing except giving Jessica's lawyer more dirt to use against me. So I forced myself to nod, turning toward the door. As I reached for the handle, Ethan spoke again. Just one piece of advice, John, move on before she destroys you completely. Jessica's a wildfire, and she'll burn down anyone in her path. You got caught in the flames, but that doesn't mean you have to let her finish the job. I paused, the weight of his words sinking in. Then, without looking back, I walked out of the office and into the main gallery, ignoring the curious stares of a couple of patrons admiring abstract sculptures. My heart thundered, my mind racing. Had I really let Jessica turn me into a punching bag all these months? Had I been so blinded by love or obligation that I didn't see the signs? It was infuriating, and horrifying, to realize how easy it was for her to manipulate me and others. And Ethan's warning about her being a wildfire refused to leave my mind. Outside, the daylight was harsh, glaring off the sidewalk. I headed to my car, the conversation replaying in my head, fueling the resolve forming in my gut. If Jessica wanted a war, I would give her one. But I also knew Ethan wasn't wrong, If I didn't play this smart, she'd raze my entire life to the ground. I slid behind the wheel, hands shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to call Angela or Michael, to tell them everything I'd learned. Another part needed to be alone, to think. The path ahead was murky, littered with legal traps, emotional booby traps, and the unstable schemes of a woman who had no remorse. One thing was certain. I couldn't afford to wait around for Jessica to make her next move. Because if I did, she'd blindside me again, and this time, I might not recover. Driving away from Ethan's gallery, I felt equal parts drained and furious. I steered my car through busy streets with no real destination in mind, just needing time to process everything. Jessica's betrayal wasn't a single event, it was an entire web of deceit that now threatened to drown me in legal and emotional turmoil. She'd turned our marriage into a stage for her twisted games, and I'd been a clueless spectator until the final act. Eventually, I found myself parked at a quiet overlook on the edge of town, gazing out at the shimmering lights below. The city looked peaceful from a distance, people living their lives, oblivious to my personal war. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and I tensed. Another call from a friend? A message from Angela? Or worse, some new ambush from Jessica? Steeling myself, I picked it up. It was a text from Michael, letting me know that Jessica had been telling mutual friends I was unhinged and mentally unstable. She'd even hinted I might harm her if she came home. The gall of that woman. My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. She was running a smear campaign, painting me as a ticking time bomb. I typed a terse response thanking Michael for the heads up and dropped the phone onto the seat, struggling to keep my composure. I needed a plan, something concrete to protect myself from her lies and to finally cut these toxic ties. My thoughts drifted to the lawyer who'd shown up earlier. He'd come prepared with ominous hints about restraining orders or legal battles. If Jessica was telling everyone I was a threat, she might be laying the groundwork for such a move. I took a deep breath, remembering Detective Ramos's advice: collect evidence, stay calm, avoid giving her any excuse to escalate. And then Angela's words echoed in my mind. You need to decide how to handle this. Whether that means fighting for your marriage, divorcing her, or something else. Fighting for the marriage wasn't an option anymore. Jessica had shredded that bond beyond repair. My choice crystallized in that moment. I had to file for divorce before she could blindside me with her own twisted version of the story. I started the engine and drove straight to a nearby all-night diner, where I knew I'd find a quiet booth and free Wi-Fi. Over a cup of bitter coffee, I scrolled through attorney listings, ignoring the gnawing ache in my stomach. I found a name that looked reputable: Vivian Carter, a family law expert with a reputation for fairness but also for tenacity in court. I fired off an email, outlining my situation in broad strokes: Jessica's repeated infidelity, her attempts to smear my name, and my need for immediate representation. The weight on my chest lifted slightly as I hit send. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a step. I was about to leave when the phone rang again, this time, a private number. My pulse spiked. Against my better judgment, I answered. John, came Jessica's voice, low and eerily calm. We need to talk. My heart hammered. There's nothing left to say, I replied, trying to sound steadier than I felt. Don't be naive, she said. I'm coming to the house tonight. We can settle this face to face. She hung up before I could protest. I cursed under my breath. The last thing I wanted was another confrontation, especially on her terms. But if she was coming over anyway, maybe it was time to lay everything out, and to let her know I was done being her doormat. An hour later, I stood in the living room, lights on, waiting. I'd thrown out the last of her random junk that was strewn around, empty cups, scattered magazines, trying to reclaim the space. The clock ticked ominously. My nerves were taut, every sound outside making me jump. Finally, headlights flashed across the window. A car door slammed. The front door opened, and Jessica strode in like she owned the place. She wore a tight black dress, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Despite everything, she still carried herself with that hateful confidence. Her eyes flicked over me, then around the house, as if checking for signs of a trap. You wanted your showdown? I said evenly. Here I am. She gave a disdainful little laugh. Don't flatter yourself, John. I came to pick up more of my things. I can't stand living in this dull suburb with a husband who goes berserk at parties. She paused, her gaze sharpening. Oh, and I hope you didn't have some grand plan to take revenge physically. Because if you lay a finger on me, I'll have the cops here in minutes. I already warned them about your temper. Of course she had. You can stop pretending you're the victim. I snapped, jaw tight. Everyone's finding out what you did. They know you're the one who's been cheating. With Mark, with Ethan. Should I go on? She rolled her eyes, tossing her hair. Believe what you want. The truth is, I was miserable. You gave me no attention, no excitement. Am I supposed to wither away? She stepped closer, her perfume swirling around me like poison. You should be thanking me for showing you how pathetic our marriage really was. A red-hot fury surged in my veins. You destroyed everything. And now you're trying to spin it all on me. But I'm not helpless, Jess. I've spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. And I'll make sure everyone knows you lied every step of the way. She blinked, genuine surprise flickering in her eyes for the first time. Then her lip curled into a sneer. Go ahead. File. In the end, I'll walk away with whatever I want. You know why? Because you're too soft to fight dirty. That's always been your problem, John. My throat tightened, but I refused to give in to her goading. I'm done giving you the power to hurt me, I said, voice cold. Pack your stuff and get out. You can pick up the rest later with the police present if you want. But our marriage is over. She stared at me for a moment, a myriad of emotions passing across her face, anger, maybe even a flash of regret, but it quickly morphed into hardened arrogance. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when your life falls apart, she hissed. I watched her stalk upstairs, rummage through closets, throwing clothes into a suitcase. My heart pounded painfully. Once, I would have begged her to stay, to fix things. Now, I couldn't wait for her to leave. The betrayal was too deep, her cruelty too sharp. I'd never see her the same way again. Minutes later, she thundered down the stairs, suitcase in hand. Without a backward glance, she slammed the door. The impact reverberated through the house, a jarring punctuation mark to the entire saga. Slowly, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. An odd calm settled over me. Yes, the legal battles were still ahead. Yes, she might sling more mud. But at least I'd taken the first step in reclaiming my life. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. My phone dinged with an email notification. Vivian Carter, the lawyer, responding that she'd represent me. A small, hopeful spark lit up my chest. Reflection. In the days that followed, I realized just how far I'd let Jessica push me, how many red flags I'd ignored. If there's one thing I learned from this nightmare, it's that you can't save a relationship that thrives on dishonesty and disrespect. I also learned that sometimes you have to protect your own heart, even if it means shattering the life you thought you wanted. The best advice I can give anyone in a similar situation is this: trust your instincts, keep evidence of any wrongdoing, and lean on the support of true friends. Most importantly, remember that someone who genuinely loves you won't make you feel worthless or crazy. If they do, it's time to walk away before you lose yourself entirely. I don't know what tomorrow holds. But tonight, as I sit here listening to the echo of that slamming door, I feel something unexpected, a sense of relief. Because even though my heart is bruised and I'm stepping into uncertain territory, I'm finally free from the twisted games of a woman who never truly loved me.